All right, thank you for staying with us. And this morning, it's about the anti-corruption fight of the administration. Actually, even successive administration or previous administration rather. It was one of the core legs of the mandate of former President Muhammadu Buhari, anti-corruption drive, a revived economy, war against insecurity when he was there. But how much of that was he able, to achieve? The jury is in the open about that. Even before that, Goodluck Jonathan time, the late Umar Musa Yar'Adua to former President Obasanjo's time, in which it was his tenure at the advent of this new democracy in 1999 that some of these anti-corruption body, apart from the statutory police and some of these other organizations, that were saddled with responsibility of upholding the law, fighting crimes, prosecution, and all of that. Now, other bodies were established, the Icpc, especially the Efcc, were established to fight corruption, financial corruption, independent corruption, and related, uh, issues, which ICPC was established for. We have the NFIU again, Financial Intelligence Agency, to fight against some of those things. But then, how much has these agencies been able to do in the years past? But then, because of time, let's narrow it down. For the past 16 months, how effective have they been? The AFCC, the ICPC, even the NFIU as well. Recently, when President Bola Ahmed Tinubu came, and even before that, there have been success stories, quote unquote success stories of what the EFCs have been able to do. But narrow it down now. How have they been, especially in the last few months? Where you talk in the street, the kind of perception, especially the FCC, how all of a sudden they have become very high-handed, which is not necessarily new. Some of their personnel go to clubs, go to lounges, all in the name of doing sting operations, and they do things that are not constant, with their laws. But when we talk about evidence, how much of that do we have? By the way, some states have petitioned them about the law establishing some of these agencies. But we're starting this morning from the success of the EFCC, the IPC, basically the anti-corruption drive of this administration. How much have they done, especially with the high-profile cases they've had on their hands, and it seems they have nothing to show for it. We have been joined this morning by a university don. He's here with us, a lawyer, a law lecturer at the University of Hull in the UK, Dr. Misbau Alamu Lateef. Thank you for joining us, Doctor.
Thank you. Good morning. Sorry, can you hear me?
Okay, if actually you can please speak up, Doctor. We can hardly hear you.
Okay, thank you. Let me check my volume then. Okay, can you hear me now? Right. Good morning. And, thank you.
Yeah, I'm sure you had my introduction. How will you place?
Yes, I did.
All right. How will you place the performance of the EFCC, the ICPC, even the NFIU, at least since President Bola Tinubu came in? Because if you ask the people on the street, it's neither here or there.
Well, I don't think the success of or otherwise of the EFCC can really be located within any government per se, particularly a government that has not spent up to 2 years in the office. And I'm saying that we could say there are areas where we can say there are successes and there are failure in all the previous governments, and also even in the current government. In the current government, for example, an immediate example of failure of EFCC that comes to mind is how the case of former governor of Kogi State, Mr. Yaya Bello, has been mismanaged by the current EFCC, and I think that has created a sort of credibility issue for the current EFCC. So that's one example of failure, and perhaps there are quite many others. But for me, generally speaking, I think the EFCC has really declined over the years when we look at what we have seen in the recent time in the context of how EFCC came into the consciousness of Nigeria when it was established in 2002 or thereabouts. And there was so much, I would say, gravitas and so much promises, which Malam Nuhu Ribadu, as the then EFCC chairman, was able to, attract to the agency. It was it was a very effective institution, but I think over the years, politicians or elite, they found their way around the institution, and I think that has occasions decline. And this decline, in my opinion, has continued, unfortunately, progressively, such that even though, as I've said, there are some successes here and there, I will readily agree that it has been so much of decline than successes. And again, because I think there have been compromises and maybe failure of those who are supposed to be in charge of the EFCC. And the case of Yaya Bello, again, I think stand out, at least in the recent time.
Yeah.
So, and like I wrote somewhere, until a closure is brought to the Yaya Bello saga, I mean, until he is brought before the court, rightly or wrongly, to answer to his to the charges against him, I don't think the current EFCC will be able to wriggle out of the credibility crisis it is going through now. I mean, Mr. Ayabelo presented himself after he was declared wanted by a court, and this declaration was also publicized by the EFCC. They had warrant of arrest and all of that, and luckily, just like that, he presented himself before the same agency, and then for whatever, I would say, irresponsible reasons, they could not arrest him. So, yes, the fight against corruption in Nigeria, I think, has moved from something that was really, was something that had so much promises, and we thought, it was a very biting dog. But unfortunately, over the years, I think the teeth, have been less biting, and they continue to be less biting and biting. I don't know. I think the corruption which the EFCC is supposed to fight has also found its way into the EFCC itself as an institution, and that is quite disappointing, or an irony, that an agency set up to fight corruption is in itself. We may say these are mere allegations, but then the allegations, from the perception on the street, like you said in your intro, cannot just be wished away. There are some of things that we could also see. I mean, they are so apparent that things are not really well with the EFCC. But in fairness to them, this is not to say, again, there are no successes. To be honest, I mean, we also know that they are very busy in court. There have been arrests here and there. And we cannot say some level of corruptions are less important than others. So for as long as they are still able to fight some corruption at some level, I think we can afford to remain optimistic that perhaps the EFCC will, will turn around and maybe find its old glory.
All right.
I don't know if the glory is gone already. Anyway.
All right. I had to mention President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, and in regard to the appointment of Ola Olukoyede, because he did that. Ola Olukoyede took over, after some time. Abdulrasheed Bawa, was suspended, he was investigated. Even till now, nothing. And that has always been, sadly, the issue. The same thing happened to Mago. Suspended, interrogated, investigated, till now, nothing. They are not prosecuted. They have always been living unceremonious version. The same thing with Ibrahim Lamode, Madam Waziri, many of them like that. Now we have Olukoyede. Before Olukoyede, there was nobody there because Bauer was suspended, but then officially took over from Bauer 12th of October 2023. A year later, when he came, he was talking tough. And, you know, he was going to do this and do that. The Yaya Bello situation came up, and he granted a full press briefing saying he was ready to leave his job if actually he won't crack this case. And, you know, we are talking about Efcc and Icpc having a sway, prosecution, and resort against politicians. You know, it's easy to parade fraudsters, the one we call Yahoo boys and Yahoo girls. You know, they put mug shots on their faces and then parade them, take their shots and put them on social media. But the big guys, yes, we know all crime are punishable, should be punishable by the law. But the big guys that are wreaking havoc to the tune of a suspected former state governor, Ohiolei was very vocal. He was going to do this and do that. But many persons are saying maybe he's doing much of a talking than doing, and he's looking like, just like you said, it's a decline. So before even taking, how will you assess the tenure of Ohiolei? He has spent 1 year in office already, 1 year and 7 days or thereabout.
Well, it is good that you have highlighted how his predecessors, you know, they departed from the Efcc, and that's another irony about the institution itself. Virtually all of them that you mentioned, including the Ribadu, who was so popular. And I must say that Ribadu himself, I mean, according to public perception, as at 2006, 2007, also got himself entangled, you know, in political influence of the then president, Olusegun Obasanjo, who was rumored to have turned Ribadu to an attacked dog, and it was so apparent. Anyway, for the current EFCC chairman, Mr. Olukayode, unfortunately, my verdict against him, you know, is going to be very harsh, and I'm going to zero this down on Yaya Bello case. And I think he actually talks too much, with due respect to him, and I think this has been one of his greatest flaw. You see, as an institution, the head of that institution is not supposed to be so feasible or voluble as we have seen Mr. Olukayode, you know, and I think this has been his major problem, like I said earlier, and this is what he has allowed to box him into the Yaya Bello corner as we speak. You know, when you promise, when you talk too much, and you promise or you make too many promises, then your words are not your band, then it becomes a credibility problem. So for me, really, yes, there have been a couple of arrests here and there. Cases are still ongoing in court. And as I said, I am not one to say some crime or corrupt practices are lesser than other. I think their mandate is to confront all corrupt practices in whatever shade. So well, as much as you want to give them credit, you know, for confronting, so if you can call them menial thieves, you know, petty thieves or petty corrupt persons, as you know, the Yahoo guys and all of them may be classified. So as much as want to give them credit for that, you know, this Yaya Bello dot in the circle, you know, and some other prominent cases like that, you know, will continue to rubbish on the integrity and credibility of the current chairman. And unfortunately, from the sign I've seen so far, if the signs are anything to go by, it is not, I mean, it is highly likely that it would also depart like his predecessor. And I hope that is not a cause, you know, for EFCC, that all of the chairmen somehow, you know, find themselves entangled. And so basically, I will not say so far so good under him, to be honest with you, because the case of Yaya Bello, and I'm repeating this, looms large. And for obvious reason, you know, so many promises were made and opportunities were bungled, and people have suspected that perhaps there were other political undercurrents, or maybe the EFCC itself is being teleguided, or maybe, I don't know. But whatever it is, as I said earlier, for me, until Mr. Olukayode clears the Yaya Bello mess, which he has allowed to happen because of the unprofessional and even irresponsible way I don't have anything against Mr. Ayabelo, and I'm not saying he's guilty of anything or not. He may actually not be guilty. But you see, the way the prosecution has been handled so far, and the issue of his arrest, the hide and seek, the drama that the Efcc has brought into the whole mix, you could see that very recently, a popular social media guy, he was invited by the Efcc, and he literally declined to attend the invitation. He actually rubbish it on his social media handle. That popular guy, I don't want to mention his name. So that is the kind of, I would say, discredit that the EFCC has brought upon himself. And people have justified. They said, look, if you can arrest Yaya Bello, or if you have handled the case of Yaya Bello in this particular manner, why should you continue to earn respect? Why should people continue to? And that was what the guy actually leveraged on. And up till now, of course, we have not had anything from the EFCC, because I guess they also lost, the moral will, to actually go after him. This is an agency that is ordinarily empowered by law to invite people and to even arrest them if they decline arrest. But because the Abelo dot in the circle has become, I would say, a major. So for me, I would not say it is so far so good under the current EFCC chairman. There have been so much noises, there have been so much drama, than not that I really want to see anybody in particular behind the jail.
Yeah.
Before trial or conviction, but we want to see more of action than all of this noise. Or when you listen to an EFCC chairman and it seems you are listening to someone who was just merely sermonizing, pontificating or even lamenting about corruption, when we should be seeing action. We should be seeing, who has been arrested, who has been prosecuted, what case is upgoing in court. Again, I'm not saying they are not busy in court. They are quite busy, and I'm familiar with some of their cases, but I'm saying they could do better.
All right, Dr. Misbau, do you think that the chairman of the EFCC, Mr. Alamu Lateef, was subdued by political influence? When he came in, he was talking tough. And of course, like Nigerians said, see, leave talk and let's see you work. And he promised the people that he was going to go after mega thieves. And he would not mind whose ox is God. He will ensure that what is sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander. As they are going for the petty thieves, they will also go for the mega thieves. But over the months, Nigerians have seen, a huge disconnection from what he said. So I'm asking you this question: Do you think that Mr. Olaolu Koyede was subdued by political influence? Because we know that there is an undue political influence in that particular commission, the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission.
Well, from what I've said so far, my own inability to even give him a pass mark, and some of the things that we also know as we read them in the media, yes, it is possible to actually run with that speculation. And you can't blame people who speculate as such, because the EFCC itself, based on all I've said so far, and some of the things that you have also highlighted, has given the room for people to speculate. So yes, we are entitled to think that perhaps there are some political influences or political undercurrent underpinning, the recent activities of the EFCC. You see, the case of Yaya Bello, again, and I'm repeating that, gave the EFCC an opportunity to actually demonstrate to the world, and I would say even this current government, that the government can go after one of its own. It's quite obvious that Mr. Ayabelo featured prominently in the electioneering processes, that brought about the current President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. So when people saw that Ayabelo was gone after, it gave some kind of, I would say, hope that this is perhaps indeed a renewed hope, because if someone as prominent as Ayabelo in that, scheme of things could be proceeded against like this, then, but all of a sudden, unfortunately, soon I mean, not, I mean, soon after, the EFCC dashed that hope with the way they have handled. Okay, why has it become so difficult, for example, to collaborate with other agencies to get Mr. Ayabelo arrested? We learn, I don't have anything against Mr. Ayabelo, and I really want to emphasize that. And I didn't ask them to go after him in the first place. So we are only analyzing based on what the EFCC itself put forward to us, and we are entitled to do so. So I don't really have this is not personally against Mr. Ayabelo, and I'm not saying he's guilty. I really want to emphasize that. But you see, the hope that the EFCC gave us when they proceeded against him, as one of the persons or people who are powerful in the current government, the EFCC dashed that hope. And that is a blot on the integrity and credibility of the chairman. So it is possible to actually suspect that perhaps some political, willing dealing has come in. And it's also possible that is not the case. It's possible that Mr. Koyode himself, is the one who has not been exactly professional or maybe serious, with handling his job. Because from all I know, the FCC have all the legal instruments to be truly independent and to be truly effective if they want to be effective.
All right.
So,
talking about effectiveness, I have two questions, but the first one is, how do we sever the EFCC from undue political influence? You've made mention that there are speculations, which might be true, that there are political undertones, political undercurrents in some of the activities of the EFCC. How do we get to a point where we sever this relationship, this untoward relationship between the EFCC and the politicians or political influence or whoever is, playing the tune for the EFCC?
Okay, I think the bit that the law can do in achieving that is to have provisions that indicate true independence of an institution. And I want to say with all authority that the EFCC Act has all the provisions of the law to make it truly an independent institution, just like the INEC. So for me, therefore, where the bit of the law has been settled, I think the rest is left to the credibility of whoever is appointed to head the institution. So this is why I will return it back to the current chairman and not even the president. Yes, it is possible the president or his handlers or whoever, are trying to, I don't know, we are allowed to speculate, rightly or wrongly. I mean, it's part of our democratic right and based on things that we can observe. But if the person appointed, is not ready to do the job or is not ready to assert that, responsibility or independence, well, there is little the law can do to help that person. So what can we do? In the first place, I think those who have the power to appoint them, like the president, should always do their best to appoint people who have credibility. And I'm not by this suggesting that Mr. Olukoyede does not have credibility. No, I don't have any evidence to suggest that, even though I've said that he is failing and he is disappointing.
All right.
But then, okay. So, but the point basically is that it goes to the credibility and integrity of the persons appointed. The law gives them the teeth to bite if they want to.
Okay.
So they can refuse the president. And a person of integrity, for example, can actually resign, can say, look, I can't do this anymore. So if Mr. Olukoyede promised that he would rather resign if he failed with Ayabelo, I say resign. If somebody is applying pressure on him, and to the extent that the integrity and credibility of the EFCC is now being dragged in the mud because of one suspect, then has it taken the bold step to resign?
All right.
So these are issues of credibility and integrity of the persons appointed.
Dr. Misbau, we have a lot to unpack today on the show, but before Femi comes in, let's talk about the influence of the judiciary on some of the activities or, the prosecution by the EFCC. We've had cases where the suspects will go to court, and the court will restrain the EFCC from inviting them for questioning, for arresting them. We've had judgment and counter judgment. We talked about the Kogi State former governor Yaya Bello. We had a judgment from the Federal High Court giving permission to the EFCC to go arrest the former governor, and another judgment from the State High Court in Kogi restricting the EFCC from going on with the arrest. So let's talk about what the damage the judiciary as caused. I mean, that's your own constituency, if I'm to put it that way. So we hope you will be frank enough to talk to us about the harm that the judiciary has caused on the prosecution of the EFCC, that is actually limiting the activities of the EFCC from doing what they are supposed to do and come out with results.
Well, when people say corruption is endemic in Nigeria, I think this is exactly what they mean. It's everywhere, unfortunately so. I mean, it's in all of our institutions of government, public, and then even in private. So for me, really, yes, it is not possible to exonerate the judiciary from the current, I would say, mess we have found ourselves as a country. Yes, there are some bad eggs in the judiciary, and some of these conflicting and contrary judgment from courts of coordinate jurisdiction, they are immediate pointers to the corrupt practices in the judiciary. But going back to the particular case that you referenced, I think it is heartwarming that eventually the Court of Appeal settled that conflict by saying that the Kogi State Court that barred the EFCC from arresting Yaya Bello or whatever, was wrong. Now, Mr. Yaya Bello has proceeded to the Supreme Court. Unfortunately, the judgment of the lower court against the EFCC that barred them from arresting, inviting, should never have happened in the first place. Yes, Chapter 4 of the 1999 Constitution guarantees certain fundamental human rights to all citizens, including Mr. Yaya Bello. So people can approach the court to enforce their fundamental human rights. They can do all of that. But you see, when people approach the court to say an investigative or prosecutory agency cannot invite them or cannot prosecute them, and you see a judge, seated in a hallowed chamber, or what is supposed to be a hallowed chamber, and grant that kind of order, it can be very scandalous, and it can only be scandalous anyway. So, but then we also have judges who are very brave, who are incorruptible, and who will not, I would say, succumb to sub-political or partisan influence. So for me, really, yes, the bad eggs in the judiciary, they have also contributed to the mess, of corrupt practices in our system. So it's a symbiotic, unfortunately, situation where multiple agencies, they work together, wittingly or unwittingly, to contribute to this rot.
All right. And quickly, before we switch gears, Dr. Lateef, still picking the Yaya Bello's case, because it appears like that's the biggest political case the EFCC is handling. And just like you said, while we are not, judging the matter, because we don't have the power to do so, but you said, and I agree, many Nigerians will agree to say, we could have the EFCC and Ohiolei, they could have used that to make a statement, and restore credibility, to the agency. But then, Evelyn talked about the undue influence of politicians, on this matter, which is our first topic this morning. The case in which a sitting governor who swore to uphold the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, the grand norm, and that of his state, has been meddling in the case. The extraction, what looked like a scene from a war movie, either from Nollywood or Hollywood, in which he prevented, when the EFCC said that they went for him, to arrest him, he came there, whisked him away, and, although many persons feel the EFCC was serious, there's a lot that could have done. Gunshots rented the air, and the place was a mess, and, that situation was there. And after series and series of calls to Yaya Bello, we learned he appeared at EFCC headquarters in the company of a sitting governor again. And the EFCC, by the way, they denied until that he wasn't there. But later, we heard that, yes, he was there, but he wasn't there in the capacity of somebody that has been invited. He came in the convoy of the governor that has immunity and all of that. A sitting governor meddling in this case. As a lawyer, what do you think the law will say, or what is the law saying on this? The immunity of Governor Ododo, does it prevent the arrest and prosecution of alleged suspects?
Well, the immunity of a sitting governor or president as guaranteed by Section 308 of the 1999 Constitution applies only to the benefit of that office holder. It doesn't even apply to their immediate family. It doesn't apply to the first lady or son or whoever. So for me, really, I think those are lame excuses on behalf of the EFCC or by the EFCC. Yes, we could condemn Mr. Ododo, the current governor of Kogi State, for all we care, for, I would say, his lack of, I don't want to, maybe decency, the way, but then this is politics. Politics in the sense that we know how Mr. Ododo himself became the governor. Yes, Mr. Ayabelo literally anointed him and an election took place. Yeah. Well, whatever it is, the election was certified credible, and that's fine. So Mr. Ododo is readily, a godson to Mr. Ayabelo. So it is okay that in politics, people support themselves, and then some do it so shamelessly that they go overboard to do things that are not decent for their office. And that is another subject for another day on the part of Mr. Ododo. I think that's about his own. That tells you, the kind of person, I'm sorry to say, he is. But beyond that, I think the blame still goes back to the EFCC. This immunity inures only to the benefit of Mr. Ododo, as I said. So nothing stops them, for example, from arresting Mr. Ayabelo on the day he stepped his foot on the premises of the EFCC. And I've, in another write-up somewhere, describe, that incident as the most irresponsible, professional failing of any security agency in the world that I've ever seen anywhere. Someone was declared wanted, you had a warrant of arrest, he came to your premises, and irresponsibly, you allow him to go. It's like a sheep walking into the den of a wolf, if you like, or lion, and then living freely. It doesn't happen anywhere. But that is by the way. So for me, really, this is not so much about Mr. Ododo than it is about the failure of an institution that has let Nigerians down. And that is the EFCC in this case. Right. Mr. Ododo is doing his own for his political capital. He wants to be seen to shield or protect his godfather. Fine. People do that in politics and even in social life and all of those. Fine. But beyond that, again, as I said earlier, the EFCC could have collaborated with other agencies. They could have smoked him out of government house. The Constitution of Nigeria does not attach immunity to government house or their premises. The immunity is for the occupier. That is a governor. Right. Okay? So they could have smoked him out by collaborating with other security agencies. They could have found him. As a former governor, he probably has police orderly who see accompany him. So why can't the police direct their orderly to arrest him or even withdraw the orderly for him, whatever the case? So for me, like I said earlier, this appears to be a multifaceted, institutional conspiracy or complicit, if you like. Otherwise, Mr. Ayabelo should have had his day in court as we speak now. Right. And I'm saying all of this because we need to protect the integrity of our institutions. I don't have anything against Mr. Ododo or Mr. Ayabelo, but you see, when people rubbish our institutions the way we have seen the EFCC handle this case so far, we would all suffer for it. And that was what gave the audacity to that popular social media guy to, rebuff recent invitation of the EFCC.
Right.
And then the EFCC appear helpless. Yes.
All right. And okay. Obviously, the FCC dropped the ball there. Time will not permit us to look into the activities of the ICPC and the NFI. But then switching gears right now, a few days ago, Kogi State, instituted a suit against the EFCC, the ICPC, and the NFIU as well. But chief among of those agencies, the FCC, and they were joined by some other states, 15 of them. Yeah. Although Ogun State have said about the suit, about the FCC, they are no more part of it, but they are still seeking redress in other cases as well. And the Kogi State government, through its Attorney General, dragged the federal government to the Apex Court to challenge the powers of the FCC, the NFIU, as well as any of its anti-corruption agencies to investigate, arrest, or even prosecute in respect of the administration of funds belonging to the state. However, while suit was pending, Ondo, Edo, Katsina, Ogun, Sokoto, Jigawa, Enugu, Benue, Anambra, Plateau, Cross River, and Niger State applied to be joined as plaintiffs. Now, it is the position of the plaintiffs that the EFCC's Establishment Act runs contrary to the Constitution, which is the supreme law, hence the EFCC's Act be declared a nullity. They said, and they argued that the Supreme Court in Dr. Joseph Nwobike and Federal Republic of Nigeria had held that it was a United Nations Convention against corruption that was reduced, emphasis on the word reduced, into the EFCC Establishment Act, and that in enacting this law in 2004, the provision of Section 12 of the 1999 Constitution as amended was not followed. So the argument was that in bringing a convention to the Nigerian law, the provision of Section 12 must be complied with. That being said, Doctor, I'll allow you to, just have an excerpt of a clip where the counsel to Kogi State government spoke on the matter. Please just hang in there with
me. The suit before the court is to challenge the powers of certain institutions set up by law to deal with issues relating to, stealing, to corruption, to resources of the state in the federal system of government. So that is the long and short of the case in court. In this regard, we are looking at institutions of the federal government set up to investigate resources and funds belonging to states. ICPC, FCC, whether indeed in a federal system of government, the current arrangement that we have.
Dr. Misbau, you had my intro on this matter and the Council of Kogi. So what do you make of this case? It was a mere United Nations Convention against corruption that was reduced into the EFCC Act, and so they are seeking redress. That's Kogi State, and they have been joined by other states as well. Your take on the matter?
Well, let me start by saying, with due respect to those who fight those other case, which I think is coming up at the Supreme Court on the 22nd of October, that is next week, Tuesday or so, I think that they're just, I'm not allowed to speculate on what the likely outcome may be, but we are allowed to at least second guess based on the precedent that we have on similar matters. And I will start by saying that the ICPC Act was similarly challenged in the same manner over a decade ago. And the case was the case of Attorney General of Ondo State and Attorney General of the Federation. The Supreme Court decided in that case that, well, the power of the National Assembly to make law, to govern the Federation, it's not limited by the fact that Nigeria is a federation, or that the federating unit also have powers to enact law to combat crime in their state. In summary, the Supreme Court decided in that case that the ICPC Act was constitutional. Now, in this current case, I've taken my time to read through some of their facts as we could. Hello?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, as we could glean from the newspaper, and for me, really, I think it's a case that is founded on a very weak foundation. Now, when they say that the EFCC Act is a reproduction, if I can use that word, of the UN Convention Against Corruption, that is not exactly correct, and that is not true. And even if that is the case, the question is that Section 12 of the 1999 Constitution actually gives the National Assembly powers to make law for the entire federation. And this is why under our Constitution, the legislative powers to make law all over Nigeria, is classified into exclusive jurisdiction, if you like, or exclusive list, where only the National Assembly can make law, and then you have the concurrent list, where other council. So where the National Assembly has made law over a subject, and in this particular case, anti-corruption, the state does not have any jurisdiction again. And there is nothing under our Constitution that bars the National Assembly, in my opinion, from making law with a national coverage, as we have seen with the Icpc and now the Efcc Act they are challenging. Section 12 of the 1999 Constitution talks about domestication of international treaty. That is, if Nigeria enters into a treaty, which is an international agreement with other nations, before you can enforce that treaty locally, you have to enact them into our local law. Can we sincerely say that is the case with the EFCC Establishment Act of 2003? The answer is no. And I give one example.
Yeah.
One of the laws that Nigeria has domesticated in our recent history is the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, which is otherwise known as Banjul Charter. Okay? Now, when Nigeria ratified that treaty at the African Union level, they simply replicated the same law under our law, okay? So that is when you literally adopted your international treaty and then domesticate them in your local law. I've gone through the provisions of the EFCC Act. There is nothing under the Act that shows that it was a replication of any UN Convention Against Corruption. Yes, you can argue that the setting up the Icpc or EFCC was influenced by international pressure. That is fine, and that is correct, and that is valid. Yeah. But the fact that this institution's establishment, was influenced by foreign pressure or our obligation internationally does not necessarily mean that we copy and pasted, our international treaty. That is not correct. So that is a fact upon which they have rested their case. Yes, and the reason why I suspect, and very strongly, that case would fail like the challenge to the Icpc Act over 10 years ago. There is nothing in the EFCC Establishment Act that requires the concurrence of the state houses of assembly to become a law of the federation. It was a law properly enacted by the National Assembly,
Lateef,
exercising their competence, to enact law for the whole federation.
Yes, if I may brought in, because of time, among the relief that is being sought is that a declaration that the federal government of Nigeria, through the NFIU, as the Nigeria Financial Intelligence Unit, or any agency of the federal government lacks the power to issue any directive, guideline, advisory, or any instrument, howsoever, called for the administration and management of funds belonging to Kogi State of Nigeria or any local government area of Kogi State, and that a declaration that the EFCC, the NFIU, or any agency of the federal government of Nigeria cannot investigate, requisition document, invite, or arrest anyone with respect to offenses arising from or touching on the administration and management of funds belonging to Kogi State of Nigeria or any local government area of Kogi State. Many persons will say, wait a minute, what exactly is the force? Apart from the briefing, this relief that has been stored, the legal briefing, many persons will easily say, is it because of Yaya Bello that you are doing this? And by the way, where's the morality? We know maybe morality is not the same thing as law, but why are they doing this at this time? And you have many states that have joined them as well. What do they have in their cupboard?
Well, it is obvious, I think there's a popular saying in Nigeria that when you fight corruption, corruption fights back. And I think that is what is playing back. When I first read about the case, the first thing I did was to run through the names of the state. And I was not really surprised that Kogi, is prominent or was prominent on that list as So for me, really, I think all of this clearly suggests, the underlying motives. And like you said, well, morality and the law may not be the same, and motive may not really matter in this case. But one thing that is certain is this. I don't see the likelihood of success of this, I would say, claim. I don't see it. Because as I said, the National Assembly is by the Constitution of Nigeria empowered to make law for federation. And you can look at examples from other federations around the world. Is it in Canada? Is it in the US? Is it in India? In a federation, there are usually federal laws. And federal laws have national coverage, even in the federation. So the states cannot claim that money allocated to them from the federation accounts cannot be questioned by a federal institution like the Efcc or the Icpc or the NFIU. So I think it's quite clear here, the mischief that these states are up to. They don't want to be accountable. And the question is that what will be the alternative? The alternative is for them to say, this is our fund, we can investigate ourselves. I mean, from the little things we have seen with how they handle independent electoral institution at the state level, and now all the states in Nigeria conduct local government election to, impose their puppets and make sure their party won all the seats. Can we really trust the states in Nigeria to fight corruption internally? The answer is no. Our states have shown to lack that credibility and capacity. And I think this is why institutions like EFCC, Icpc, INEC, are quite important, as we have seen in other federations, as I've said. So in a federation, it is consistent with standard practice to have federal agency, federal police, federal this, federal that, for cases or institutions like this. At any rate, they receive allocation from federation accounts, but then they don't want to be accounted to Nigerian institution. I think they are just jokers, and I'm not sorry to say that. So I don't see the case heading to any bay of success. And I see the Supreme Court, following their precedent in the case of Attorney General of Ondo State and others, and Attorney General of Federation, where as I said, they ruled or decided that the Icpc Act was constitutional and that the National Assembly had the power to make law to fight corruptions all over Nigeria. So for me, really, I think it's just a distraction for the moment. And by next week, Tuesday or thereabout, or whenever the Supreme Court decides, we will know, where this is headed. But I don't see them succeed. I think it's just a joke.
All right, Dr. Misbau Alamu Lateef, lawyer, law lecturer at the University of All United Kingdom. We thank you for your time on our show this morning, your takes and submissions. We appreciate them. Thank you so much.
Thank you too. My pleasure. Good morning.
Good morning. Have for yourself a good day. All right. That's the conversation this morning, Femi. And, with what Dr. Lateef ended with, saying you cannot feed from a table and not want to account, be accountable to that particular table. I mean, what the governors, state governments wants to do, you collect from FAC, but you do not want to be accountable to.
It's more like, once you have given us, is our money. We decide to do it. Don't ask us any question again. You don't have the right to ask us.
And of course, this actually should be an eye-opener to many citizens. Know what exactly it's
people
priority
they are elect,
to their state governors and the state government. That will be all for the show this morning. Watch a recap of the show on our YouTube channel at Western Spring TV. You can also connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, and X at Western Spring Television. My name is Evelyn Ohiolei. Stay tuned for Spring Trends coming right after this broadcast.
And of course, my parting shot today will be on the landing point of our last discussion with Dr. Lateef that says you're feeding from a table, just like Evelyn said, you are being given a food, money to administer, and you are saying the person that is giving you the law of the land should stay away. Whatever you get is your business. There is no right for anybody to ask you how you spend it. I think this speaks to our citizens to be more alive and active in calling for responsibility, because when you hear, and this is not just about Kogi State, 14 or 15 other states are involved in this as well, to say we are joining you, EFCC should stand down on our matter, let us do these things ourselves. How we spend it is none of your business. Your guess is as good as mine. We should make informed decisions, because all these things will come back to us. Femi Ojo is my name. Please stay alive in anything that you do and everything. We'll be back tomorrow, God willing.